He
Okay,
asked
okay.
if
My fault.
he asked if you were pissing.
I said, are you
Oh
pissing?
no, I'm doing the dishes currently. That's why. Um. Okay, yeah, but how do you ground the claim atheism is false?
Say that one more time.
How do you ground the claim atheism is false?
Well, I mean, you can use a syllogism if you want.
So you're going to propose this dichotomy, Christianity or theism, atheism.
Say again.
You're going to propose it's a dichotomy, theism and atheism.
I mean, that's part of it, but that's regarding epistemology.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, what's the syllogism?
I'm pulling it up here one quick. Actually, do you know what? I'm gonna try something else. Do you subscribe to like modal logic, like S5 axioms and stuff like that? I'm not gonna use the modal ontological argument itself, but I'm just asking if you subscribe to that.
I mean, honestly, when it comes to like the foundations of model logic, yeah, when it comes to like the S5 system, system K, and all that bullshit, I just don't see it.
Okay. So premise one would be logic, reasoning, intelligibility, and identity are preconditions for knowledge.
What do you mean by preconditions?
Necessities for something to be the case.
Okay, and knowledge is what?
Justified true belief.
Okay, so logic, read. Sure. Wait, intelligibility, and we were just saying, I feel like intelligibility there is kind of certified.
Yeah, something. Yeah, intelligibility in terms of like something being capable of being described in any way. It doesn't have to do with identity specifically, but just being able to describe anything in any sense with language.
Okay, sure. So those are preconditions of knowledge. And premise two is?
Logic, reasoning, intelligibility, and identity are not brute facts, but point to a necessary ground or foundation for their existence and coherence.
Okay, so that's a disagreement.
Are they brute facts?
Well, no, I feel like the verbiage. I feel like you're trying to describe these things or something that's being grounded or reasoned. So let's say, like, logic, for example. Do you take the statement that logic is a proposition as true?
Logic as a proposition as true?
Yeah, so, like, when we make the statement, things that are grounded are propositions, right? You can't ground a command or something like that, right? So, like, reason and efforts like that are exclusive propositions.
It's the ability to do said thing, not the actual propositions themselves.
Wait, so when you say ground, we just mean like reason or have
the foundation for being able to do said thing.
Okay, what does it mean for logic to have a foundation? I'm confused.
Yeah, so like the laws of logic, for example, would be a concept. And so the foundation for said thing to be a concept, right? Would you believe that that concept is generated in you?
I don't even know if I would take laws of logic to be a concept, but
logic is not a concept.
It's not what I said. I don't know if I would take it because like when we say concepts, we normally say something that has a dependency on the mind or is conformed or formed by the mind. I wouldn't say that the laws of logic are dependent on the mind, so I don't know if I take them to be conceptual.
So you'd say that logic is independent of mind.
I mean, obviously, but I don't even like, because logic to me doesn't seem to be this thing that's like objective, subjective. It just seems to be like a natural property of what we observe.
Natural property. Okay, so it's something that we're observing.
It's a property of the thing we observe in the sense, so like, or intrinsic ontological property.
Yeah. So you'd say that in some way, shape, or form, like logic holds an ontology.
Sure.
Okay. Would that ontology be based in like a concreteness or an abstract? Material or immaterial?
Oh, material or immaterial? I'm kind of gnostic on it. It'll be like more of something like emergent in a sense.
Emergent properties?
Yeah, you would say it's more of emergent in a sense.
And so like what would be your personal argument for things being like emergent properties?
No, what are you saying? Like, I mean, honestly, like I don't really argue that much, but if I was to just think of something, it would probably be like an analogical account, like color, for example.
Yeah, but would it be considered an objective like analogy, or would it be considered like something that we're all just using as a consensus? So like color, like when you said like the color of something would be red, right? Would you say that like when we're coming to the conclusion that something is red, that if everybody agrees that something is red, then it is red?
No, that's intersubjective. Like how I would just say something. Well, so like when we say red, right, or like when we say someone sees red as a true statement, it's not that everyone sees red. Like yeah, of course, some people cannot. But so given, let's say the wave, light waves or whatever, right, and then given the way it reflects off your eyes, what is being produced is red, right? But given different properties, right, and giving different sets, yeah, you could see a different color, but it doesn't mean it's objective. If anything, it means it's not objective, or yeah, objective and just true.
Okay. So would you say that the wavelength of red is identical to the property of redness?
I don't even know what that would. So the wavelength of red is identical to the property of red. No,
I asked you. Okay, so then the property would be considered conceptual.
The property would be considered because no, the property is real. So like the thing there is that what we identify as the entailment of these two things being conjoined, right, is red. If you want to say the identification is conceptual, then I mean sure, that's like trivial for most things. So, but the entity itself actually does exist independent of conceptuality.
The properties?
Yeah.
Do you hold to like a Platonic form view?
Platonism or whatever it's called.
So you hold to Platonism in a sense, or you are just a Platonist?
In the sense, yeah. Because I don't really pertain to the view fully. I just use it in like the most intuitive sense.
So do you believe then in that case that there are Platonic forms at least?
And when you say that, we're saying about real forms of concepts. So like time, space.
Yeah, basically like objective concepts that we're basically applying subjectively to the world.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What would be your method of knowing that the subjective thing that we're applying to the world is mapping to the objective concept?
Is mapping accurately?
Yeah.
I mean, so to say beyond reasonable doubt, then like we have no idea of that. But to say like inductively speaking, Christ.
Yeah,
like,
but with that being said, then you'd be sacrificing that knowledge then. If you say that you can't, if you don't have the certitude of said thing, because you just said you.
Honestly, I don't even agree with the idea that knowledge is true justified belief. That just seems like circular to me. But because like when we say something's true, right, we say it's justified. So if I was to say if you know something, or let's say like a rock is there, right, and I ask you the way you justify that, you're going to go to the truth. But then that's presupposing you have the knowledge of that, and that just infinitely regresses. Then it just seems like you're just saying it's about justification.
Yeah, that's the reason. That's a reason why we would obviously hold the JTB in our view, because there would be a finality point to truth in the first place.
Yeah, it's just
there wouldn't be considered an infinite regression. It would be an infinite regression in the atheistic view. I agree.
Yeah, see the thing there is that's just not needed. Like you could say, it's like we could stop at a finite view, but honestly, if it's possible to the contrary, then I mean that kind of defeats theism, doesn't it? Because God is necessary.
What would be your definition of knowledge then?
Knowledge, it's pretty primitive. It would be just something that we have, or it should be like a belief that we uphold. Honestly, so like when I say,
can you have false knowledge?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and so how do you create a distinction between true and false knowledge?
Well, when we say true knowledge, when you say like something's true, you got to say, under the atheist hypothesis, you're probably going to say there's a set of relevant data, and the relevant data makes me believe this conclusion, right? And then you would say for the false knowledge, at least, it's unjustified, right? Or it's just like proven to be most likely false, right? Because we're just going induction here, because I'm not really going to posit we have some type of certainty.
Yeah, but how does consistency actually lead to something being true, though? Because I could just provide a Gettier case.
Well, see, like no one posits truth in this sense, because like honestly, yeah, your cognitive ability are fallible, and nothing you know is.
My question that I asked you though was the difference between true knowledge and false knowledge.
Yeah,
and so that's why I'm asking. You said you'd use induction, right?
Well, yeah, when I say true there, I'm not saying like certainty in this sense. I'm just saying something that's upheld to be true.
Okay, so what would you use to determine the certainty of something being true?
Yeah, I just would deny we have certainty, really, honestly.
Would you say?
Except for like, I would deny we have certainty in most things. So except for like our existences and like stuff like that, that would just get circular denied.
So you can't determine anything to be true then?
You see, you're an epistemic nihilist and
No, not
willing to bite the bullet on hard solipsism based
well,
on
no.
the last thing that you just said.
Okay, well, I don't like the problem there. Okay, well, first, just to be clear, yeah, there are some things that you can know, and those things are things that would just regress in circularity to say you deny, right? So to say, like I don't exist is just to be circular in itself, right? So there's no possibility of fallibility.
That's not circular. That's contradictory.
Yeah, it is circular. But to say, I do not exist is a presuppose of existence there, and then you're just going in a circle.
That's a contradiction.
Well, I mean, there's a circularity or metaphysical circularity, and contradictions are like synonymous in a sense, but or the way that's described. And then you said, am I able to buy on solipsism? Well, the thing there, I mean, honestly, when it comes to theism, if you're positing that there isn't a possible world where God does not exist, right? He's a necessity. Then honestly, any position I bite on, you're able to give me a contradiction. So it doesn't really matter what position I bite on, honestly.
Yeah, that's literally that's literally the entire point for the existence of God, is the fact that every single worldview leads to that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So how does solipsism lead to God?
Solipsism does not lead to God. Every worldview leading into solipsism, making knowledge impossible, leads to the fact that God would be the case in terms of actually having explanatory power for anything whatsoever in philosophy. Like, if you hold to like hard solipsism, then philosophy isn't even possible in your view. I mean, like, you just made like all of these arguments about how there's like properties of things, and things are immaterial, and things have this and things have that, but you can't actually make any of that to be the case because of the fact that you just straight up granted the fact that nothing is certain at all. So when you said like you held to like a Platonic forms in a sense as well, you're not even certain that you do that. You're not certain that there's properties of anything. You're not certain that there's
it's just arbitrary, and to you, within the foundations of your own philosophical system that you've presented to us, those things are nothing but useful fictions.
Well, I feel like there's a distinction between the epistemic proposition there, right? So when we say I'm not like certain anything, that doesn't deny that certainty exists, just denies that the awareness of it. And again, that's just like some type of epistemic awareness.
Okay.
And when we talk about that for a worldview, then I don't really understand it, because you have to deny that, well, within the given worldview, certainty can exist independent of the awareness. All the tag arguments and stuff like that do is substantiate the certainty.
Because if there is a worldview out there that does contain the fullness of truth and a correspondence with reality, that worldview would exist in contradiction to the rest of the other worldviews, right? It would negate the truth aptness of the other worldviews, would it not?
Yeah, that's in contrary to that. Yeah, sure.
So that's what we are arguing for when we run tag. It's a paradigmatic comparison.
Yeah, but like this thing there is like tag. So the only reason tag could even follow is if you grant or say that God is a contingent necessity, right? Well, if you're like going
contingent necessity,
no.
Yeah,
no.
So God
that's not accurate at all.
Hold on, wait. So you know where the term or?
Well,
no, I know what it means.
Like if you say that something is necessary, being a necessity, but you're saying it's a contingent necessity. Right, like when you say contingent, are you referring to it in terms of like possible worlds, like modal logic?
I mean, sure. All I say is given it only exists given a set of conditions. And those set of conditions there is like certainty, right? Well, and then if you're gonna say like the only way you could actually derive some like type of truthness independent of that is to say that certainty collapses or non-certainty collapses into some type of like or just collapses a worldview, which you can't really derive that. So you're just going to say God is dependent on a set of worlds that only have certainty. And then if we examine the amount of worlds that don't have certainty and contrary, it just makes God pretty improbable.
Well, so the argument is that due to the fact that no worldviews are capable of having any form of certainty, then if we're capable of applying explanatory power to our worldview and actually applying a justification that does not lead to either solipsism or a contradiction, and it cannot be internally refuted in of itself, then that would be considered a worldview that holds a much higher coherence than anything else possible. So that would actually lead to a higher justification or a higher probability for anything to be the case within that worldview.
Well, that's the entire point of the argument. Well, the thing there is probability only works in the side of atheism. Like you don't really have like a probably less account of a necessity. Like you don't go to say.
Well, when I say prob, I didn't mean it like in like the analytical sense.
Okay.
Like when I say probability, I'm saying like like the chance for something to just be true, right?
Also,
And
I'm kind of confused when you derive that, well, there's no certainty exists. I already told you, like, let's say my existence, for example, right? Given my worldview, to deny my existence is just blatantly absurd, right? It would be a contradiction or circular, right?
yeah, but
So,
you declaring it to be
yeah.
absurd, are you certain that it's absurd?
It's not circular.
I mean, you can identify that it's not circular. I mean, honestly, I could like really formulate how it's circular, but whatever.
Would you consider
It's a
would
contradiction, right?
you consider that belief being absurd? Are you certain of that?
Am I certain of that? Yeah, I mean, sure.
Like 100% certain.
100% certain. I'm 99% certain.
So then you're 100% certain then that you exist.
I'm 100% certain. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then you do believe then that you have a 100% certainty that there is an identity or an external world.
I mean, you could say epistemically, sure, even independent of that, sure. But like, the thing there is like you're asking the epistemic question. Do I believe said thing? Like, we're talking about the truthness. Yeah, I have to exist for me to believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's just trivial things there.
Well, in order to make truth claims, you have to already have a foundation
No,
in epistemology, don't you?
No, why would you? Okay, see, that's the thing. Like, when we say, let's say a truth claim, right? Something to be true. I don't know why I like need a foundation.
Because you're presupposing knowledge, aren't you?
I'm presupposed. I don't even know what that means to presuppose knowledge. So,
You're granting yourself that knowledge exists in order to make a truth claim.
well, that's just analytically true given the content. What?
Yeah, but then
Like,
that would obviously be
you're
presupposing
falling-
that there's content in the like that's the
Hold
whole. It
on.
leads to
I
that.
feel like you're getting into what I'm doing in this sense, and not what the worldview is positing. Like, yeah, you could say my awareness of these things all you want, but it doesn't collapse the worldview. Like, you have to actually attack the worldview itself. You're just saying, are you certain? Are you aware of this? Do you have truth? Well, does a worldview have truth in itself is what you should be asking. And if you're going to say that, then you can't really give a contradiction, because the only contradiction would be the epistemic awareness. Okay, so like say atheism. So if I say atheism or like a possible world with no humans, you'll say God can't exist in there because there's no minds, right? There is no foundation, or there's not a need for a foundation. So let's say a possible no.
I was just going to say that we do actually make the claim that it derives contradictions within the worldview anyway. If you hold to, for example, the inability to have certitude of anything, then when you make claims about anything whatsoever, you're contradicting your worldview.
Okay. So again, I feel like that's just going to the awareness. Like, do you have like a critique with the worldview itself, independent of the awareness, or like is it just going to be awareness? Like, that's all that kind of substantiates.
No, it's not necessarily just your awareness of said thing. You admitted yourself that like that. So in order for something to be true, right? That's why I asked you earlier about the distinction between true knowledge and false knowledge. You said that you don't have the certitude to be able to determine those two things in a definite sense. And so with that being said, if I make any claim whatsoever about anything at all, you don't have the ability to show that, the certitude of anything that's said to anybody on this panel. Actually, nobody's capable of doing any of that.
That's not okay. So like when you say there's a certainty, right, or like what's the distinction between like something not or knowing something true or knowing something like false knowledge, right? When you say that, I'm kind of confused on how you're using it now, because before it just seems to be the case that we're talking about my epistemic awareness of a proposition that's true or false, right? And when I say there's no relevant distinction, I'm talking about, let's say like, I just need to give a distinction. Like when we're talking about overall, like let's say like empirical claims, yeah, there is no certainty there because like I agree the senses are false. But when we're talking about like metaphysical truths and logical truths, yeah, there are ways.
Yeah, but that's
I mean,
is there do you have certitude that logic is objective, for example?
You do even have a grounding for
again,
the laws of logic.
Do I have a grounding for the laws of logic? No, I don't need one.
So you grant them to yourself axiomatically.
Also, like I don't know what it means to, again, like for logic to be grounded. When we say we ground something, it's normally dealing with a proposition. I don't know what it means for the laws of logic to be grounded. I feel like that's just misusing logic in itself.
Sufficient reason for them.
Oh, so how do you have a sufficient reason for something that's not a proposition? Something that's non-propositional, what would be the sufficient reason?
As a conceptual entity?
A conceptual entity is going to be a sufficient reason for what?
No, I'm saying no. You're just classifying these merely as propositions. We're saying that they're more than that.
No, I'm saying they're not propositions, right? That's the whole point. I'm saying, well, the reason you're trying to give the sufficient reason is exclusive of propositions.
Would you agree that they are conceptual entities?
I'm Gnostic on that. I don't really know if they're conceptual. Like, Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
Well, we need to define what they are in order to
Like I
explain
said,
it.
I already,
why
yeah,
they
I
need
already kind of
why-
went through this stuff. It was-
I forgot if they're formula. It's not formulas, but it's like some shit in logic like that. No, it's not formulas. Fuck. But yeah, well, they're not propositions. It's pretty much. I'll just use the word formula. So given a system, right? These are just
Did the laws of logic exist prior to human minds?
Yeah, I would assume so.
In
the
what
laws,
manner?
the laws of logic, are they
Yeah.
conceptual?
So given the relevant data I have, I would make the assumption. And the relevant data I have would just
So
be,
it's by induction.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, which I already
Okay.
presented a getter your case. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, when you say like the laws of logic existed before humans, like I don't even know, like if you granted something existed before the humans, then I would just apply that. But,
Did the law
All
of
right,
identity
let me-
exist
let me-
before
Oh,
there was?
I'm-
we're kind of going backwards to like the beginning of the conversation. Let's get back to where we were.
Okay, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've already got through all of this. So, when you say you believe the laws of logic are concepts,
no, again.
so what are they then? Because I still try to figure that out.
Like okay, you can just say they're formulas for a system.
They're formulas for a system.
Yeah,
Okay, and the formula conceptual?
there's a formula. I don't know what I'm saying.
Okay,
I don't even know what-
you said
Like,
yeah.
again, I don't know what it means for like them to be conceptual. Like okay, so like when we say a formula being conceptual, yo, what the fuck is he texting me? Okay, I don't know what it means for a formula to be conceptual in this sense. Like, are you just saying
because
it's
because you're using a set of, like, for example, propositions to make something be the case, right?
yeah. Wait, you said I'm using something to be or using something to proposition to.
Yeah, like a
something to be the case?
like a formula. You're making multiple different types of propositions to determine that something is the case.
I mean, given the system, not really, but you could say external to the system.
All right, what do you define formula as?
We could just say entities or rules for a system that allows for functionality.
Okay, and so when we are applying that to something to basically utilize the laws of logic, is that something that is conceptual?
Is that something conceptual? No, I
Is that
wouldn't say
something?
so.
Is it so? That's also not concept. Okay, so then, and that, what is it?
So okay, and when you're asking is conceptual, are you just saying are we doing it by a process of thinking or the process of mind?
Yeah. So so the ability to do said thing, to apply formulas, to use the laws of logic, right? That capability in and of itself, those are
That
conceptual.
capability in itself to you, yeah. Okay, so just to be clear, just saying for you to use the laws of logic, right? You use the mind or whatever.
I mean, we would say, like, because that's the thing, is that the ability to use the laws of logic conceptually shows that the laws of logic themselves would then be conceptual and that we are grasping at them.
Okay, so like I don't think we like use them in that sense. Like when you look at a tree, you don't like automatically go, okay, well I have to identify that tree as a tree. It's just something intrinsic to the process.
Yeah, you'd be using the law of identity by saying it's a tree.
Yeah, but it's not something you're using, or not something in a conscious sense as like you're processing it. No, like yeah, it's just something that's just here with the cognitive process.
It's being
itself.
used. It's being
But-
used. Yeah.
but-
So then,
but-
if it's being
But
used,
that tree has its own. Yeah, that
Yeah,
tree
but
has
when
its
you
own
say
ontology.
subjective, like when you say subjective, I'm interpreting that as a conscious way of using something or thinking of something.
But there is an ontology to a tree, right?
There's ontology, and when you say sure, bro, there's a nature to it. Sure.
And there would be a distinct ontology to that of a rock, right?
There'll be a distinct ontology to that. Sure.
So there's an identity of what a tree is and a rock is, regardless of the semantics that we use to ascribe to these
What do you think?
ontological entities.
Hold on. What do you take ontology to be there? What the hell?
existence.
So when you think,
Existence, being.
so independent of the semantical entailment or the semantics of something, it exists independently of that.
Yeah. Semantics are posterior.
I wouldn't really. I mean, sure, bro. Actually, I mean, in the intuitive sense, no. Outside of that, I would really have.
No, I mean, intuition wouldn't matter if we're talking about prior to humans.
Prior to humans, why would intuition matter? Oh, I'm
No,
just saying, well,
I said it wouldn't matter because of the fact that it's prior to humans. Because
Yeah,
intuition would be the utilization of our minds.
Hold on. Okay, well, if I'm gonna say it's just intuitive, right? I'm gonna just say, well, given something independent of the intuition, I just wouldn't know, right? So again, it's going to be something I've been consequent. But
So you wouldn't. So then in that case, when you declare that there's an ontology of the tree and an ontology of the rock, if there's no human beings to make that proposition, are you saying there is no ontological difference between a tree and a rock now?
there is an ontological difference. Like if you're just asking if there's an ontological difference, and then like is the ontological difference distinct from the or independent of the semantical entailment, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, and we discover these ontological realities of a tree or a rock, and then we ascribe a semantic title to it, right?
I mean, yeah, off of the way we interpret it.
But it exists prior to all of that, right?
It exists to. I mean, we don't have any way of knowing. You could claim it though. Like so, like if I look at a tree,
So it's just all arbitrary in your worldview.
not necessarily. But like if I look at a tree, right, and I say, well, okay, well I see that tree. Okay, well that tree is there, and I go to say, well before I existed, before anyone existed, right? Who's there to make the claim that that tree still exists? I mean. Yeah, again, you can make the claim.
Making the claim is not what we're saying. We're saying, is there an ontology prior to the human intellect?
Yeah, and I'm saying we have no way of knowing.
Okay, so then we're using a concept. We're using a concept to determine that there is an ontology.
We're using a concept to determine there's an ontology.
Yeah, the law of identity.
I just don't take the law of identity to be a concept. Like the functionality, you're saying the conscious functionality of it, sure. But the it itself, yeah, no, it's not conceptual. I feel like that's just a misuse of what we agreed to.
Okay, so if somebody, for example, were to create a law about something in any way, shape, or form, all right, even if it includes science or if it includes something like philosophy in any way, shape, or form, like Leibniz's law, right, of indiscernibles. All right, do you hold to that?
No, I haven't heard of that. Likeness law of indiscernibles.
Yeah. So it basically says that we know that two things are distinct from each other if they possess different properties.
Okay. And you're saying, well, okay, and you're saying depending on or independent if it was created or not, we know it.
Yeah, the law. Yeah.
I mean, independent if it was. I don't even know what it. So okay, when you say that. I feel like, okay, I'm not understanding there because are you saying created in the sense that some type of God created it or a sense of the linguistical like description?
Well, in our view, the laws of logic are actually a reflection of God's mind. It's a reflection. It's a reflection of the divine mind. It's called the logi, which is basically where it's actually showing the mapping of the universe, and it's something that we're grasping at. And so the laws of logic and reasoning and the ability to do any of these types of things are a representation of the way that divine ideas would work, divine concepts.
Okay, and so you would. Oh, okay, sad argument. So you're just saying
The law of logic itself would be grounded in God's mind.
It would be grounded in God's mind.
He would be the one to generate the existence of said concept itself.
I mean, yeah, honestly, I just don't take it. I just don't know why. Okay. Well, if we're just going to use that argument, I feel like you were just using more of a tag argument initially, but I feel like you're okay.
No, my argument was actually going to lead more into MOA if we continue.
MOA? Oh, modal. Okay. Yeah, I would just need an argument to why they're conceptual, honestly, since that's just dependency and foundation.
Well, so premise 2 is what you denied, which had nothing to do with it being conceptual at the time. I said logic, reasoning, intelligibility, and identity are not brute facts, but that they point to a necessary foundation for their existence.
Yeah, I don't know why they just point to that necessary foundation, but I mean, honestly, that's kind of not
because if there is no necessary foundation for the law, then the laws aren't necessary.
What? Okay, that doesn't even make sense. Okay,
that does. That logically follows.
No, because then you're just proposing system K, but then you're just saying, then why can't we just say it's the system itself, or let's say it's just K or the K variable there? Why can't we just say the laws are the K variable? Mm-hmm. Like that wouldn't really make sense. And by the way, I feel like this is kind of like it's not relevant. I just need the argument why they're conceptual, since that's the whole point of the argument there, right? To say they're conceptual, and then conceptual things are dependent on mind.
Yeah. So the law itself, when we make the proposition of the law, the proposition states because the law itself is a proposition, right?
No. Yeah, that's why I was initially rejected. Yeah, I don't take like the laws of logic, for example, to be propositional, because like when we say a proposition, we just say a declarative statement that can be true or false. I don't even think it meets. I mean, you could say it meets a declarative stance of it. I mean, depending on how you use it, but I don't take the laws of logic to be true or false, honestly.
You don't take the laws of logic to be true or false.
Yeah, so when we say true, right, or when we should say true or false, we're just saying we have some type of like true fact, right? I just wouldn't know what it would mean for example, for it to be false and for it to be true in the sense, like something. Yeah, I just wouldn't know what it would what it mean would be for it to be true. Yeah, we could just say that.
So then, how can you use logic in general to try to make any form of propositions in any worldview, if you can't declare it as either true or false?
Yeah, so again, I feel like there's just an axiom of the thing we're using, or just anything we use. And when we say like it's true, we're giving it some type of state and some type of justification, but it just doesn't meet those criteria because it's just not something to be grounded, right? It's just something intrinsic to the things we use. Mm-hmm. Like I would just pose it's just an intrinsic fact of the things.
An intrinsic fact.
Is it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But is something being a fact? Is that a concept?
Is that a concept? I mean, you could like conceptualize it in itself, though. I wouldn't take a fact to be something conceptual in a sense.
Yeah, but how would you actually like proceed to something being a fact?
How would I
by
proceed?
using because you're saying that it's simply something that's inherently a fact of something. And so I'm saying, how do we map so how do you map the usage of the laws of logic to that thing actually being the case?
Okay, like I feel like we're taking a jump, and I'm just saying there is no jump. You're taking the jump that the laws of logic are true or they exist, and then how do we know we're using them? Well, under my view,
how do we know we're actually doing them right?
Yeah, like under my view, it wouldn't be anything right or wrong, like I said, because there's no fallibility there. There's no wrong way to use the laws of logic. That just seems like grammatically structured wrong. It's like saying,
but like how would you know that?
How would I know that? I mean, again, it just go into like just in something intrinsic. Like when we say,
but you don't know what's intrinsic to something.
I don't know what something is intrinsic to something.
You wouldn't know that.
Okay,
within your worldview, you would grant that you wouldn't have that certitude.
I feel like you're trying to apply a reason to all these things and then say there's a consequence, but there is no real consequence. I could have, like, I feel like you're saying,
yeah, you can make a bunch of stuff up. I mean, you can do that.
But like I feel like if something's not certain to you, yeah, if you're supposing if you don't have a foundation, you don't know anything, and I just don't see how that falls in itself. Like I could say I don't have a foundation for X scientific or like for this X theory, right? I don't have a foundation. It doesn't like decrease the likelihood at all. Like,
all scientific theories that exist have a foundation for why something is the case.
Yeah, we're just saying hypothetically.
I would say that's a false hypothetical. If there's no foundation for something, then it's entirely arbitrary and has no there's no reason for something to be the case.
Okay, so everything has a foundation to you?
Everything that's factual, yeah.
Everything that's factual. Give me an example of something that's factual to you.
Like for example, the speed of light.
The speed of light is factual?
Yes.
And you know that beyond reasonable doubt?
Yes.
Okay, how do you know that beyond reasonable doubt?
It's been materially measured.
It's been material. Okay, I don't think that substantiates anything there. I mean,
it would. Like you could, if we're talking about something empirical, there's nothing wrong with using an empirical method. I'd use a scientific method.
Well, yeah, I don't say that, but then you're going to take the jump to say it's beyond reasonable doubt, which goes to say it's 100%. But the way we use to determine these set things are fallible, which would be the cognitive processes. Like I can just literally just use like a reverse transcendental argument there to say, well, your worldview doesn't actually posit certainty in itself or empirical certainty.
No, we would, because we would say that certainty in of itself would be the necessity of an existence of God that grounds all that knowledge.
Yeah, but then that just seems like a question back there, because if I'm just going to say, right, well, the thing you use, right, is fallible, right, and then you're just going to say, though, this is God. Well, does God change the nature of that fallibility? Or does he just give you, well, okay, well, you're receiving this information right, but it just seems like a question.
Wait, whoa, repeat that?
Yeah, so, well, we're saying the fallibility of the cognitive processes, and we're saying, well, just using that, which you don't know that for certainty because the thing you're using is fallible in itself, right? It can be wrong. So to say it's certain is just to say that's a cert. But then you're going to say you have God there.
Something would be certain because it would have to be grounded in something that is necessary. And if the thing, because in our view, truth is a who.
Well, that's the question, Beck. Because again, you wouldn't know that because you wouldn't know that for
but
sure.
I would know that because the certitude, I would actually have an explanatory power for all these things that I'm certain on.
Okay, but the way you interpret that in itself is going through those fallible processes. There isn't a gap you're able to reach here to say you have something certain, because in itself the thing you're using is fallible. Like
What am I using that's fallible in that case?
the cognitive processes.
I mean, like, I believe the cognitive processes are fallible in of themselves, but we also have a belief that there's more than just like the cognitive processes for something to be the case.
I mean, yeah, but we're talking about the interpretation there. We're talking about like your intrinsic view of the world.
Yeah,
Because
there's different ways in which we would try to make the argument that something is true or not, depending on whatever the proposition is. Like, if somebody makes the proposition that the Earth is flat, there would be specific methods in which we would actually show that to not be the case, right?
Yeah, but again, you're processing relevant sense data, right? And you're interpreting it in such a way. But the interpretation and the process there in itself can be fallible. You can get a wrong outcome, or the datum in itself.
You're presupposing that sense data is the only way that we can come to know these things.
No, yeah, we're talking about empirical facts, because you gave me like the speed of light, for example. And how do you know something out? How do you know?
Okay, that's fine for this aspect of the argument, but that's ignoring the totality of our worldview.
Okay, yeah.
We were talking about something specific. I was just trying to address like.
Yeah, so like,
facts.
so do you ground empirical claims to be? Well, you say you don't have certainty in empirical claims, right?
I'll recant honestly the way that I proposed that. All right, so if we're talking about, like, for example, the speed of light, at the end of the day, it is still a theory, right? And I would say honestly that something being more probably apt to this would be chemistry.
Chemistry, okay.
Utilizing chemistry, turning elements into other elements, for example.
Okay, and how do you know that the representation or what we're doing is accurate?
Compounds and other compounds.
Yeah, compounds and okay. Well, what if there's just some possible way, or no? What if there's just some way or possible scenario in which the way we're doing it is just, let's say, an outcome, right? It's an outcome, and then we have the correct outcome. How do you know we're going for the correct outcome? The compounds in itself doesn't suffice that. You would need something that's axiomatic in front of your face that says your cognitive processes or the way you're interpreting the sense data is correct, right? And then you're going to say, well, you could say that's God, but then you're going to have to rely.
In order to be doing something in the correct manner, you would have to understand its telos.
Wait, hold on. You said to understand you're doing something in the correct manner, you have to understand it's what?
Telos.
Telos?
Yes.
Wait, what is telos?
Do you know what teleology is?
Oh, teleology. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh my bad. I thought you were talking about something in chemistry, or technically. And you say you have to understand this. Okay, well, that's just getting to another epistemic problem. How do you know you understand this chemistry beyond, or not chemistry, but telos beyond reasonable doubt?
Because it's been revealed to us.
Okay, and you're going to say it's been revealed to God by God, right?
Of course.
Okay, and how do you know that for certainty?
Through the impossibility of the contrary. This is the paradigmatic comparison argument that we were talking about earlier.
You're saying, the impossibility of the contrary. So, what's the epistemic contradiction?
I already ran you through it. If there is a
I already told you what the epistemic contradiction would be within your worldview, at least.
No, because
you denied the certitude for something to be the case. So then, when you make a proposition about anything, you don't have the certitude for that to be the case, but you're making the case for something. That would be a contradiction.
I'm just saying. I'm just giving you a internal critique with your worldview that would just put it. I'm saying, given the facts we substantiated, I'm just reducing your worldview to the same thing. Like, God in your worldview doesn't matter because you don't have certainty in the process. You could say,
but you're presupposing that certainty has to come from an axiom.
I'm presupposing certainty.
That's the whole issue. Like, the internal critique is failing because you're imposing your worldview on our critique.
No,
you're saying our justification process has to be the same as yours, or it's not a justification at all.
Well, no, I'm saying you can go to God, but everything that you're revealing to yourself has to go through the same process. I'm not saying in the sense exactly the justification.
You just did it again.
You just did it again, like quite literally.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, given like a cognitive fact, every single justification has to be processed. Like, I feel like that's not disagreeable there, right?
Yeah, but in the means in which that is processed and justified differs, and you're imposing your manner of how you come to that conclusion on us.
Let me see if I can type it out. All right. Look. In our view, so our argument is that all worldviews eventually lead to a uncertainty or the impossibility of knowledge in general. Right? That's one of the things that we argue for. Okay. And so, if we are capable of representing this, the impossibility of the contrary.
You mean all other worldviews, right? Not all worldviews, right?
Yeah. So if we're capable, I mean, obviously that's a claim that we would make for that. Through the impossibility of the contrary, then when we assert our position, you critiquing it, you're already uncertain from your own view, but you are asking for justification, right? But you're already uncertain in your own view. You're asking us to justify our worldview, but you're already uncertain of your own system. So then it doesn't follow, because you're critiquing us with your own worldview, which is false, based off it being impossible to gather knowledge in the first place.
Okay, well,
that's why he's saying that you're bleeding your worldview into ours, because if we show you that you have an epistemic uncertainty, when you ask me, for example, this is a reductio. If we show you that knowledge is impossible in your worldview, and then you say, well, what's your argument for that thing to be the case? I could say unicorn Bob Jim, and that suffices to your worldview.
Okay, but you're going by JTB still. That's the problem there.
Yeah,
like,
and I hold to JTB.
I already told you the problem with JTB, and I feel like if you're going to say, if you're going to try to use, I already told you the problem.
So now you're admitting that you're not performing an internal critique.
No, because when he asked me for my definition of knowledge, I feel like that we were going by. But if we're going back to JTB, then yeah, sure, it'll be changed. But then I just don't really accept JTB. And then if we're finna go back to the internal critique, well, that has a dependency on what you have to
grant JTB to do a proper internal critique on our worldview.
I guess we were just like on a misunderstanding, because when he asked me for my definition and we continued there, I thought we were accepting my definition here and following
for talking about your worldview, absolutely. But if you want to critique our worldview, then obviously,
that's my bad, because I took the transition to your worldview. Okay, you're fine. That's my apologies on that one. Okay, well then I wouldn't be giving an internal critique in the sense. Then we just have to understand. Well, under JTB, right? Under JTB, I can grant you this in some fashion, but then I don't really just appeal to JTB, so it kind of just falls there in the sense, right? Mm-hmm. And then if we go back to the atheism thing, well, then of course you have the dependency relation of JTB. Huh? So
if you're going to critique,
I can grant, I feel like here I can grant you the argument under JTB, but if I just don't prescribe to JTB, then the argument doesn't follow at all. Because
but what would be your reasoning for not subscribing to JTB?
Yeah, I already gave the contradiction with it, or I just gave you the circularity, right? So, justify
give your argument again for that.
Okay, so justify true belief, right, for JTB. So let's say, it was just pretty much that JTB leads into infinitism, right? So to say, well, we have a fact, right, or something true. Well, we're saying that's synonymous with knowing is true first, right? So you have a fact, or you have whatever truth you want to say. Knowing that thing is true is synonymous with it being true in itself. Okay. Then we have to go to the justification part. Well, if we believe in some type of justification, we first believe it is true, then you just wouldn't accept that would be knowledge of it. Okay. I get you that. But then we have to regress in justification for these facts, right? And then we just lead into just an infinite, regression and justification.
How is it an infinite regression if it's grounded in God?
I mean, the whole thing here is God. So if you're going to say, well, God is just a reason for JTB, I just don't even I feel like now you're relating God, or now you're just saying, well,
there is a final grounding for these things, and we know who God is because he has revealed himself to us.
Okay, well, I feel like to get into anywhere in the argument, we have to substantiate something that we have even grounds on. Now, of course, I'm not going to accept that, right? If you're going to say it's just reducible God, right? Because
to actually perform an internal critique, you would have to venture into our worldview.
Okay.
Grant the aspects of our worldview and see if it's actually consistent.
Okay, the thing there is, I'm just telling you the problem with JTB, and then you're just defending theism. I'm not saying I'm giving you an internal critique for theism right here. I'm just saying we have to understand the problem with JTB, and if you're just going to put a theism there, well, then that's just regression to back to step one, right? We were on step 5, now we're just going back to step 1.
We already performed an internal critique on your worldview, and knowledge is impossible within it. So now we are positing a worldview where knowledge is not impossible, and you are still holding to your false worldview, where knowledge is impossible, to make knowledge claims about our worldview. Do you understand where the problem is there?
Okay, I feel like the only problem here is that you're going by JTB to make that critique, and if I just don't prescribe to JTB...
Your worldview can't give you knowledge, so why should we listen to anything? Why ought we listen to your critiques of our worldview?
Okay, I accepted your view. I mean, like, I accepted not JTB, remember? And then when you gave your definition of knowledge, I asked you to describe the definition or the distinction between false knowledge and true knowledge with your view, and you said you don't have a certitude of either.
Well, yeah, I already told you that. I already gave you the epistemic distinction. When we say, "Am I aware?" And then the other guy kind of butted in. I don't think he was going by JTB. I feel like that's the only consensus you have to do that. I gave you a pretty relevant distinction there. But when he just said, when he just applied the certainty, the epistemic certainty, yeah. But so let's see. Let's just regress back to that then. Okay. Do I have a distinction between certainty or some type of truth? Or true knowledge and false knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, true knowledge under the view would just be something that leads into absurdity or contradiction, right?
False knowledge?
Yeah, and false knowledge was just false knowledge in the sense it's just something that's empirically fallible, right? I would just say, or you could say
you said true knowledge. Hold on, I just want to make sure maybe you misspoke. You said true knowledge is something that just leads into absurdity or what?
No, okay, true knowledge is the contrary, leading to absurdity, right? So this is the only available option. Like, let's say like a dichotomy, and one can't happen. Mm-hmm. This is true. And then you could say, well, false knowledge there, could just be the opposite, honestly. Yeah, you could just say that. And then if we're talking about like some type of empiricism or like empirics, right? Then we would just lead into induction and just taking probability.
Yeah, and so then when I got into induction, I mentioned a Gettier case, right, regarding induction. Would you still hold to the certainty of using induction to determine something to be the case?
Well, no, when I say, when you say certainty of using induction, are you saying absolute in induction? No, I don't ever grant induction is fully true. I grant we accept things, right, that are probabilistic. And when I say accept there, I'm just saying using for a well-formed, like, for, let's say, let's say just using it, for example. Mm-hmm. So when we say that, I feel like you can't even, I mean, I'm not gonna say you can't, but there, I feel like the initial critique doesn't really work there, just because we clear things up.
Well, I mean, because if we're talking about like using induction to deter, so do you claim then that you use induction to determine something to be true knowledge?
No. So the way I use induction for like day-to-day life, life issues, like not issues necessarily, but just day-to-day life. But like when we talk about like metaphysical truths, right, and just things outside of that day-to-day normative usage, then yeah, well, you could say you use cross-examination, for example, or cross-examination or whatever.
Is cross-examination like, does that provide certitude?
Epistemically at least, yeah.
Okay, and give me an example of you cross-examining two things.
Okay, let's say we have two opposing theses. One posits a wall is white. The other posits a wall is blue. Cross-examining would be examining. So we would just say under the idea the wall is white, it posits two impossible things, right? And then, well, we'll go to the other and we'll say it posits no impossibility. Well, the wall, and let's say the wall is white, the wall is either white or blue or whatever the fuck the other color was, right? That's a dichotomy. In the cross-examination here is to say two of the other things can't happen, or one, right? Or there's just any inconsistency with the other, then we'll take the other, right? So if one has a inconsistency and blue doesn't, then I identify blue as true there. You could just say that. And inconsistency is just something internally that can happen.
And so would you use something in the empirical sense then to determine that the wall is a certain color?
In the empirical sense,
I mean, like, what are you using to determine the property?
the wall is white in the empirical sense.
I mean, like, would it be considered in the empirical sense, or would you go back to what you originally said you affirmed, saying that it would possess the property of blueness?
Well, yeah, when I use the empirical method, there is just it's just reliability and census, honestly, or we could just say we could just give an intersubjective account, right? To say,
have you ever read Immanuel Kant before?
Immanuel Kant, I've heard of Immanuel Kant's metaphysics. Yeah, I've read his metaphysics things.
Have you ever read the critique? Have you ever read the Critique of Pure Reason?
Of Pure Reason, no.
So the thing, yeah. So the thing about the Critique of Pure Reason, right? It attacks that exact thing that you're using, and it specifically states that when you're using, for example, empirical data to determine something to be the case, it doesn't actually map the reality of said thing with only pure reason, because pure reason is something that's entirely within your mind.
No, is this the what's it called? The objective world versus like
noumena versus phenomena.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, so you don't have the ability to actually you don't have an ability to create a bridge between noumena and phenomena.
Well, no, because I give the distinction there between these metaphysical truths and let's say metaphysical truth, for example, and the empirical truth. The empirical truth are just probabilistic claims. That's what I just identify as empirical truth.
So everything but the wall being a certain color, or the wall possessing the property of like blueness, for example, right? When you say that wall is blue, right, that would be considered phenomena. That would be considered something that you are perceiving, or something that you are seeing in some way, shape, or form via the senses.
Yeah, that's something I believe.
And then, yeah. So then, how would you map that to the actual noumena itself of the actual wall possessing blueness?
So independent of the perception.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, again, then we'll have to go under. We'll construct it, right? So we'll say first we have the intersubjective claim, right? So say, well, out of a set of 90 people, for example, 80 people see the same thing I see, right? That would be one, and then we'll say
consensus.
Damn, I lost my second here. Yeah, okay, well, yeah, that's the first one would be consensus, and then the second one is just reliability and census. The property, right? So we'll say, given, let's say, the property or whatever wavelength color that reacts to my eyes, right? Whatever that produces, or whatever we uphold it to produce, that's what I would believe there. So we'll have an intersubjective or consensus account, and then we'll just have something that we'll just reduce it, right? And then when we reduce it, we will just see it's just emergent in a sense, for at least a color.
Yeah, but like your ability to go from perceiving something as blue and then determining it as an emergent property, that's the thing that you still haven't shown is possible.
When you say, wait, I feel like it's pretty. I feel like that's pretty evident. The possibility there.
I mean the certainty. Why would I grant that?
Oh, okay. So the possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, honestly, I feel like that just regresses into just what's it called?
Dollops.
Just some type of modal semantics. No, I feel like that just regresses into modal semantics. Like, why is it possible that my semantic or my senses map onto reality? I feel like that's like circular.
I'm not saying why it's possible. I'm more like saying like, what is your argument for mapping things onto the reality from your concept?
I mean, you could just say some type of evolutionary position, but I mean, for evolutionary position that, we could just say we formed from the universe, right?
Is that what you affirm?
The justification you just gave, you wouldn't actually be able to critique like an ancient pagan who said like, obviously the rain god is why we have storms.
No, so there's a distinction. When I say evolutionary position, I say we form from something, right? And then it just seems reasonable to believe that we form from something, we have an intrinsic property of it, right? So for example, we could say a garden, for example. Let's say we grew some crops, right? We'll say something of those crops is the same as something of that garden, or the crops have something of the garden. And then it just seems unreasonable to say we evolved, right, from whatever, right? We could say we evolved from like just anything in the universe. Mm-hmm. And then it just seems like we don't have any relation, or we don't have any epistemic relation to the universe. And that just seems like completely absurd, because given the thesis before, we'll propose that we have something exact or something of the universe.
Yeah. So when you say, like, for example, that you've formed from the universe, like, if that's what you're going to use as an argumentation for that, right? Like, what would be, like, when you say formed from the universe, what do you mean by that, man?
Yeah, so if we reduce, or we like say, examine the de-evolution, let's say, of humans and minds, it's just going to reduce to something in the universe, and then the evolution there will just be the process we are at now from the whatever it was in the universe.
Yeah, but like when you mean evolution, are you referring to like us like gradually becoming humans?
Um, Gradually becoming humans, or gradually just becoming what we are now. Unless you want to say that's human.
And so how do we actually know though that just because like that the evolution is not actually, for example, making it harder to make actual reasoning or distinctions?
Wait, okay, hold on. Wasn't this wait, is this internal or external critique? I always feel like we were at crossings. Okay, whatever. You said, so how do we know that evolution isn't making it difficulter or like more difficult?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's just like a weird position to offer up even then. And like when we say like under the atheist hypothesis, no one posits like some type of necessity there. So I wouldn't deny the possibility. Again, I just like we'll just reference.
Well, I mean, because like in the doctrine of evolution, right? Like you don't believe that there actually is some form of necessary cause or something that's actually causing evolution to occur, right?
In this in the sense as is there from the thing that causes us, no, but from the thing if we regress,
there's no deterministic value to how you're evolving.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, given the content of the evolution, I would say it points to a particular way, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in a particular way. It just points to a set of things, right?
Yes, but the reason that, like, for example, the reasoning behind who we are and why we are what we are, right? Like
why we are what we are.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that would reduce either to randomness or coincidence.
No, so I'll say the evolutionary processes, it just keeps reducing sets and sets and sets until we get to the exact thing. So, for example, if I don't know, let's say a tomato, or let's say just a random vegetable growing, right? If it keeps developing in such a way, and there's identifiable properties that pertains it to a set, and it keeps going into one set. Okay, let's say move to another set, and then we get the exact thing. Well, we would say the evolution points to something, right? Not in any like, let's say like mind way or like intentional way. It just points to something, how it was developed. Now, the developmental process itself, sure, you could say that's random, but but when you say it's absurd to say that, or not absurd, when you say how do we know it's not making it more difficult, I feel like the evolution pointed to sets that we pertain to now, right?
Mm-hmm. And so when we're talking about like the set becoming like a new set, right? When we're talking about like evolution.
No, I'm saying the entity develops from a set to another set.
Yes. Yeah. Cross speciation.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying though that you would say that there's an indeterminism to that.
There's I just would say we just wouldn't know in a sense. I mean, there could be, or I mean, yeah, of course there could be. I just wouldn't know in a sense. But I feel like even if there was, for example, it wouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you wouldn't consider that a problem then?
I wouldn't consider it a problem towards it be deterministic or not deterministic.
Well, the ability. I mean, honestly, like conceding to the fact that it would be indeterminate.
Oh, no. Why would it be a problem?
Because you use like evolutionary capabilities as like, for example, a reasoning behind how we can come to the fact that something is true or false, like in a sense, right? I know that I reduced you like way down, but I'm just trying to keep it simplistic because we've been talking for a long time.
Okay.
But with that in a generic sense, right? If the evolution of you to be Brolus.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the evolution that caused Brolus to be Brolus is indeterminate, right? And you're using that as a reason to how you can determine yourself for something to be the case as part of it. I know that's not your entire paradigm in terms of this critique.
Okay.
But then that would lead to more uncertainty.
Oh, okay. Are you just saying, well, if it wasn't determined, then it's just leading to randomness?
Yes.
Well, then I feel like I don't really see a problem with that, because the whole point was that how do we know, or how do we have any reason to believe that our senses map on? And if we were, let's say, like for the vegetable, if it was grew in, let's say, a garden, then we would assume, right, it has something of the garden, right? And I mean, honestly,
saying I don't see how something would just not be the case. I mean, can I do that too?
No, I'm just saying, well, it doesn't really defeat the point, because if it was deterministic or not deterministic, it would still grow in the garden, meaning we would still have something of the garden, right? So regardless of how it determined or not determined, it doesn't really matter there, because the whole point is that it grew in a garden. We have something of the garden, so that's some reason to believe that it would map onto reality, right? It would map onto the thing it was growing. For example, you would have some type of well, let's say any vegetable, right? The vegetable would have some type of property that would warrant or point to that it was growing in a garden, right?
I mean, obviously that would be entirely based, though, in a worldview that you have, though, to make any of those claims, right?
It would be based in the worldview, sure.
Okay. So then when we're utilizing things like when we're talking about all this certainty and the ability to map things, like we've been talking about, map things from the concept of saying, like, for example, that thing is growing in the garden. I'm obviously conceptualizing something growing in the garden, right? And I'm witnessing something, and I'm conceptualizing said thing that I'm witnessing. I'm asking that how we can go from conceptualizing something existing to actually determining that it does in fact exist. Absent to me.
I mean, the claim isn't that I'm certain in these empirical claims, right? The whole claim there is that I have some type of reason to believe over the doubt that it does exist. It doesn't say there is no doubt. It just goes to say the strong reason to believe in something is over the doubt.
But what determines something as a strong reason to believe versus a weak?
I was just say a preponderance, honestly.
What?
A preponderance, like, so I'll say a preponderance of evidence. So let's say there's multiple things.
But how much evidence is necessary?
How much evidence is necessary? It depends on what we're referencing. Like if we say, let's give like a law case, for example. Let's say like a small case. It wouldn't take a lot. Like we could say like 3 to 5 reasons to believe in something, and contrary to 1 to maybe 2 reasons. It kind of depends on the chronological order of events there, right? But just generally, right? You would just say, if you want me to give a percentile, then I would just say anything over like the 65 to 60% more reason than not.
And would you say that that's something that would be considered an objective standard to determining something as a case?
No, I don't think that to be objective. I think take it to be normative, right? But no, I wouldn't accept that to be objective, because everyone has a standard on how they accept things.
Okay, so then it's subjective.
Sure.
The determining truth is subjective in your worldview.
I mean, I give the distinction between the type of truths I'm talking about, but determining.
But then the probability of said thing to be the case based off of the set of evidences is different,
right? We're talking about.
I mean, it could be honestly based off of anything. Like if we're talking about like metaphysical argumentation, like how many times can I make a syllogism that logically follows?
Well, okay. Well, that was for the empiric. So let's talk about for something like my existence, right? Well, for the existence there, I feel like everyone would have the same method, or yet the same true method. Now, epistemically, how they would interpret and understand could be distinct, but they all come to the same outcome through the same intuitive method. Not intuitive, but the same naturalistic method.
I mean, that obviously would be presupposing everybody uses things the same way, of course.
No, it would just presuppose everyone has something the same, right? And the said thing is they exist. And that's just, of course, trivial given the statement.
Yeah, cogito.
And when we say that...
Cogito.
Yeah, cogito ergo sum. And so, let's say, like, I think, therefore I exist. That's trivial. But that's just, like, a method to say you exist. But I feel like everyone has a objective method that's usable, right? And, you know, that could be that method, or that could be that method, right? Or you could just say, or it's just true that if you didn't exist, you wouldn't be able to probabilize it, right? Or, yeah, probabilize it.
Yeah, but it still leads to the other problem, though. If we go back to like the empirical, like when you're talking about the empirical stuff, That's the reason why I keep asking you, like, what we use to actually map the concepts that we're making on something or the phenomena to the things that are the nomina. And you made the claim yourself that you would use a set of evidences, right? But that set of evidences, you admitted, is subjective, and different people have different methods and different evidences and amounts of evidences that are necessary for that thing to actually be mapped onto reality properly. So there is no objective method in which you can map something onto reality.
Yeah, for empirical claim. Do you think I exist as an empirical claim?
I mean, like, I guess in a sense it would be, but not fully. No.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not fully an empirical claim, I prescribe it to
I would say that when you say I exist, you're implying something empirical, because when you say I think, that's senses.
I mean, I agree. The conjunct of it is, or not the conjunct, but yeah, I agree in a sense it is empirical. Like you're claiming something empirical to exist, but the thing in itself, right? To say I exist, right? I would say you could use any method, or I could say there is an objective method that can be used, right? And just to be clear, there is a distinction between something can be used, right, and being used, right? So it's like something objective cannot be used, or something objective cannot be used, for example, or not for example, but
yeah. So,
okay, yeah. So just to be clear, there is objective method to warrant claims like that, or identity claims and metaphysical claims.
Like what? Like the laws?
No, I wouldn't say the laws of logic are the things.
So what would we use to make metaphysical identity?
What would we use to make metaphysical identity?
Because you said maybe I misheard you, but if I didn't, correct me. Did you say that there are objective methods that we can use to determine things like identity?
Identities, not identity. Yeah, sure, not identity states. And what I mean, like, there's things we can use to determine identity. We could just, there's things we can use to, say that there's something is or something not, right? Things like that, a negation and positive claims like that.
Yes, but then determining something to exist external to yourself, right, would be using different methods for that thing to be the case, right? Because obviously there are the cases. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you'd have to, right? Because like if you're talking about, like the validity of anything whatsoever to be external to yourself and not a hallucination, right? You'd use different things, like for example the consensus, right? Like I know I'm not hallucinating if I can point to both of my friends and be like, you seeing this shit? And they're like, yeah, I'm seeing this shit.
I mean, things, yeah, so we use things external to myself to identify things like that. Sure.
You'd make metaphysical claims based off of the fact that you've empirically verified something is not, you're not tripping.
No, not metaphor. What? No, because what?
Well, so like if everybody sees something with their eyes, would you make the metaphysical claim it exists?
I'll make the metaphysical claim there's something there, or there could be something there.
Okay, so then what would we use to map that of everybody seeing something in their perception phenomena to the thing actually being the case?
No, there's something. There could be something there. That's the verbiage I use. Now, it actually being there, that's the empirical claim. But yeah. Well, so I mean,
it actually being there is like stating that something obviously possesses a position in space time. If we're talking about the empirical method, right? But in order for something to possess a position in space time, it would have to exist, right?
It would have to. Okay, it would have to have the possibility of something existing, not itself. Because
what?
Yeah, so there will have to be something that could exist in said space, right? I'm not going to say no. If we're saying there is like a definite fact that something takes up space, something has to be there to take up space, then yeah, right? Because then you're saying, well, then you're basing it off of all these, factual predicates.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that, then yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you'd map metaphysical truths from empirical claims.
Yeah, if there's a deductive basis, right?
A deductive basis.
And when I say deductive basis, I mean, yeah, I'm saying, well, predicated off of a set of facts, right? So like I just gave you, well, if let's say if the truth there is that something takes up space, right? For something to take up space, there has to be something there, right? Something took up space. Now, what it exactly is this thing. That would be a deductive foundation or basis, because we're going off of a set of facts to come to this conclusion.
I mean, going off of a set of facts, of course, and would these facts be mind dependent?
Would these facts be no? They're mind independent.
They're mind independent.
Yeah, because when
So
we
then
say
you'd have to be presupposing then that you already know what the actual reality that you're mapping to is.
No, we'll just know. We'll just have to know something. Oh, I mean, we'll have to know something about the reality. I mean,
Okay.
in the sense, because there's some. Okay, well, given that scenario, it's just indeterminable because there's within the subjective reality and let's say the external world, we would know both things, right? Because there is something true of both, right? For example, for let's say the external world, something exists in the external world, something exists in my subjective world, for example. That is true. So there's something is true of both worlds that we're able to use. That's why I say deductive, something that is exclusive or something that is shared between both worlds.
Okay. Well, I've had you up here for about an hour and a half, so I'm gonna go ahead and start moving on, man. I appreciate the convos, intellectual. Help me out. You should definitely come up here more.
Sure. Please,
Appreciate it.
Let me give you a follow.
Alrighty.